And now, an Envision Financial podcast with Luke Smith on Canberra's 2CC.
Good afternoon. Leon Delaney speaking to you, but I'm not actually here. And I'm about to introduce somebody else who's also not actually here, Luke Smith from Envision Financial. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and I'm not actually here either.
No, it turns out we're both away at the same time. So what we've done is we have pre-recorded today's program so that it can be played back as originally scheduled, even though we're both not actually here.
It's actually one of those movies, isn't it? If you're hearing this,
yes,
we're both dead.
No,
we're not.
No, we're not. No, we'll be back live in the studio in the not too distant future. But for this week, it's what they might call a pre-canned package, or
exactly.
something of that nature. Here we go. Then it's time to talk about this week's topic. Now, we're getting closer and closer to the end of the financial year, so it's a good time to take a look at some misconceptions that people have as they head towards the accounting date, 30th of June. So what are the most common misconceptions that people might have?
Yeah, so the first one is, I've retired from the workforce. I can't add any money to super. That's wrong. You always have to look and say, am I eligible to make the contribution? Under the age of 67 and under the age of 75, it doesn't matter what you want to do in relation to your gainful employment. It might be wonderfully advantageous for you to make a deductible contribution because I may have sold an investment property and I retire at 30 June and this year I haven't worked and I've sold an asset that could create a capital gain. It would be very advantageous for you to consider using the $30,000 concessional limit or the catch-up concessional limit if you are under $500,000. I'd also then be thinking in relation to that, what will my balance be at 30 June? So if we thought about the sale in the next financial year and you've just retired, or you retired recently, try and get your balance under 500,000 if you can, because that might open up a huge deductible window that could help offset the capital gains on the sale of a property. So separate working and contribution and start with, why do I need to make one and am I eligible? Because working may not even factor into that situation. Where it does matter, if you're going to make a deductible contribution to super, you need to meet a work test over the age of 67, which is doing 40 hours work in 30 days. Under 67, there is nothing that stops you from being able to make a contribution. But I get that one all the time. I've stopped work, I can't do it. Says who? The ladies at Marshall? Don't worry about it. The next one is, I can't claim a deduction if I'm not working. Well, as we've just touched on, yes, you can. So separate, can I put it in or not, against can I claim it or not, back to why am I doing it? Do I or do I not need a tax deduction? Another big one that I find people get wrong as well, I need to put money into super to lower my tax. And this concept seems to melt everybody's brain. If you're earning less than about 50 grand, you're not going to get a lot of benefit from a tax perspective by making a deductible contribution to super. I love your thinking. I love the planning. I love that you've addressed saving for later. But if you've got income to 50 grand, your effective marginal tax rate is less than 15%. So you start at 0, you go to 18, that's tax-free, and then you work your way up to 50,000. A lot of people look at it and go, I earn X, so I pay tax at this level. You don't. You pay tax all the way up the sliding scale. So don't go and make contributions to super thinking you're lowering your tax. If the difference between your marginal tax rate and the effective rate of tax you pay is less than 15%, don't make a tax deduction because you're actually costing yourself money. So people assume making a deductible contribution is always good. Sometimes it isn't. Next one I think about is, my balance is over $500,000 today. I can't make a deductible contribution before June using the catch-up legislation. Well, your balance today is irrelevant. Your eligibility to use the catch-up concessional legislation was 30 June last year. So your balance could have been $490,000. Today your balance is $510,000. You're still eligible to make the contribution because you know you have the space in your limits. You know you are under $500,000 from all combined super at 30 June. So you can make the contribution this year. That assumption could be really expensive because you could have a significant amount of money available to go into super and minimise your tax. The next one is, I can't put money from a pension back into super. Yeah, you can. You can't put it back into that pension account, but there's nothing stopping me from being organised before 30 June and saying to my fund, on the 1st of May, I'd like 10% of my balance. And let's say I had $500,000 in there, I'd take 50,000. I might be able to put 25 into super for myself and 25 into super for my wife. I've used accumulated super because I'm over 60 and I've taken 10% under the transition rules. I've then put that money into another super fund and I'm eligible to claim deductions provided I have room in my cap space to lower both of our taxable incomes. And I've paid nothing to take that money out because I'm over 60. So I want people to start thinking about super as a pool of money, as a resource to apply other strategic considerations to it, because it's a great way to lower tax in that example. Another one I get is, well, my kids don't pay any tax out of super when I die. Well, that's not right. They will pay 17% on the taxable portion of your superannuation balance because a taxable component is generated from superannuation guarantee payments from work, salary sacrifice or personal deductible contributions from yourself, and earnings within the fund. And when you die, the fund says what percentage of your balance is taxable and what percentage of your balance is tax-free. Now, we can fix that over time by undertaking a recontribution strategy that we've spoken about in previous shows. But if you were at the age where this starts to become valuable, a 10% contribution or a pension payment out of your superannuation and then putting money back in as a non-concessional contribution where no deductions claimed is a way to start increasing the tax-free and reducing the taxable, which your kids will thank you for later. You will see no benefit in that strategy, but from an estate perspective, it will have a hugely, hugely powerful impact on what you can transfer to the next generation. The next one I get all the time is, are self-managed super funds expensive? That one I get all the time. Well, it depends. If you start a self-managed superannuation fund with a smaller balance, yes, comparatively, it will be expensive. You start a self-managed superannuation fund with a balance of more than about 1.2, 1.3 million, it's the cheapest fund in Australia with the most flexibility and the most control. And I think the Rolls Royce of superannuation accounts. Now, I'm not talking about investment return here. I'm talking about strategic options and control to address tax to the kids, to address investments, to address pensions, franking credits, and a range of other things that is an entire show. But people always make the assumption they're hard to run. They're not. They're expensive to use. They're not. Used in the right situations. A Ferrari would be an expensive car if you were delivering bread. So you probably wouldn't do it. Super funds are the same, especially SMSF. In the right situations, wonderfully flexible vehicle. Another one I get is, I don't have $20,000 spare to start investing. Who said you need 20 grand? You can open a Vanguard account with $200. You can open up a micro investing app with $100. Just start doing something. You don't have to be an investment guru. 95% of people have their super in a balanced option. So go to one of these providers, pick a growth or a high growth option. It's pre-mixed. Just start saving for yourself or just start saving for your kids, because compound interest needs time and it needs contributions. Another one I get is, we're not going to get any Centrelink because I'm going to retire in June and I'm over the asset threshold. Yeah, you might be. But what about your spouse? We did a show a little while ago about super splitting. If you get superannuation in the younger person's name and you don't start a pension, it's exempt in the eyes of Centrelink. So if I was 67 and I had $1 million in super, I'm not going to get a lot in the relation to age pension because I'm really close to the cap under the asset test. If I took $500,000 out and I put it into my wife's name, and my wife's 5 years younger than me, and my wife doesn't start a pension, all of a sudden Centrelink go, what do you have? Now you have $500,000 less. So don't assume just because it's in your name it needs to stay there. You need to be strategic, because a lot of people come in and say, oh, I've paid tax, I'm entitled to it, I should be getting it. This isn't. Well, you might be able to. Just think outside the box. Don't assume you're not going to get it, and understand what the strategies are to maximise your position going forwards.
Here's one I know you've raised on previous programs, and this is the misconception: I have a will that takes care of all my assets. But apparently that's not entirely true.
Correct. Exactly right. I think a will and the estate planning side of people's affairs is the most underrated, undervalued advice that anybody could get, because as parents and as people, we spend our lives working, saving, earning so we can have the lifestyle that we're shooting for. And at the end of the day, you want to do things you can then transfer assets with as much certainty and control as is achievable through a well-written document. And I get all of the time, oh, I've got a will, I don't need that. But your will has no legal control over your super. Do you have a binding death nomination in your super fund? I don't know. That's a problem. And you need to make sure that if you do have a will and a well-written will, that the superannuation is directed potentially to the estate so that the will can do its job. And most of the legal practitioners out there do wonderful work to structure things, and people then go and make a binding death nomination to their kids that circumvents all of the great work that's done over here. So make sure if you are doing your estate planning, you're across or you've incorporated what happens to my super and where does it go, because you need to get all that money in the same river, because the will has no legal control over super. That's why you have reversionary pensions and binding death nominations. So get good advice. Don't assume, because it can get really expensive. If you thought it was going to go over there and it doesn't, you've got some really, really big problems.
Once again, it really does come back to getting some strong advice, doesn't it?
Oh, 100%. As I say, I think great estate planning advice is the most important thing people can do outside of manage their assets, because you're transferring. It's not like it's important. You're only transferring everything you legally own on this earth. So it's not like it's vital that you get it correct. It's not something I'd be leaving to chance.
And for those who are still confused, Luke's being sarcastic.
Correct.
Yes.
Exactly right. Yeah. If that comment doesn't shock you, then you need to pull over.
Yeah. Luke Smith from Envision Financial is with me in the studio today, even though we're both not actually here.
Correct.
Because we've pre-recorded this particular package. We'll be back with more straight after this message from our sponsors on 2CC. Good afternoon, and how the devil are you? It's Leon Delaney, even though I'm not actually here today, and Luke Smith joins me, even though he's also not actually here today. Yes, here's one we prepared earlier. Good afternoon once again, Luke.
Thanks very much.
Well, we've been talking this afternoon about preventing misconceptions as we head towards the end of the financial year, and we've covered a lot of territory today, but there's still maybe one or two misconceptions we haven't touched on.
Yeah, look, exactly, and I think this one is very prevalent at the moment, is my balanced option actually balanced? You know, we've seen oil prices fly, we've seen markets rise, we've seen markets fall, and you know, there are a range of things going on at the moment that are causing some additional volatility in valuations. And like most people come in and say, well, it's longer term, this will pass, the oil price will improve, et cetera, et cetera. All very, very true. People are also now very aware of, well, what's my investment option in this particular fund? And does balance mean what I think it means? Now, for me, balanced is half growth, half defensive. In probably 70% of industry funds, it's 70 to 75% in growth assets and 20 to 30% in defensive assets, which is a very, very large swing if your perception of what you hold is not true. So we generally see during times of volatility increased concern, and people look and they say, oh, it's gone down or up this much, and oh, this has happened, and people become concerned, which I totally understand. But you need to keep in mind that your lack of understanding in relation to what you're actually invested in is contributing to the size of the swings that you may be seeing in the value of your accounts, because a balanced fund that is 50-50 will have less volatility than a balanced fund that is 70-30, 75-25, because you'll hold traditionally larger exposures to Australia and larger exposures to the international sector, which we've seen come under significant pressure in light of a range of recent events. So if you are concerned, have a look in your fund and see what some other options may be to try and just reduce the exposure to growth assets to a level that you may be more comfortable with. Because people have a perception of risk tolerance until they're in the eye of the storm and start to realise that, maybe I've overestimated my ability to tolerate this. But it comes back to looking and saying, what does my balanced option that I'm in actually invest in, and what percentages do I hold when I look at the report that I get or the website that I go to, and there's the pizza with all the different colours in it. A traditional balanced account is half growth, half defensive, not 70-30, 75-25. So that's one that people sort of are really becoming aware of at the moment, like we see through COVID, like we saw through the GFC, like we through a tech bubble. Volatility makes people become more aware of what they hold.
Indeed. And of course, one of the issues here is that while we think the word balanced should actually mean balanced, there's no legal definition. So any fund manager can apply the term as they see fit, can't they?
Exactly right. And that's where I think people become frustrated in that it's generally a measure of performance, this balance versus this balance. But as I say in the office, if your car's going down the parkway doing 140 and my car's going down the parkway doing 100, and we both have the same car, you can't say that your car's better without disclosing that you're driving at 140. Just because it's yellow doesn't mean it's faster than white. And that's what I mean by understanding the risk tolerance that you're carrying, because the volatility will swing significantly.
I'm glad you didn't say red, because we all know red cars do actually go faster, don't they?
Exactly why I didn't say red.
These details are important.
They matter.
Luke, we've reached the point of the program today where I have to ask, where can listeners get more information?
Yeah, so office number 6260-4749. We have envisionfinancial.com.au on the internet. We've got the podcast, The Strategy Stacker, Luke Talks Money on iTunes and Spotify. We have Envision Financial Canberra on YouTube, where you can subscribe and get a back catalogue of all of our shows. And we have Smart Money Strategy, your ultimate guide to financial planning, in all good and bad bookstores.
Indeed we have. Luke, thanks very much. And
Pleasure.
We'll catch you again in the not very distant future.
See you soon.
There you go. Luke Smith from Envision Financial. And we'll catch up with Luke again on another Friday afternoon in another universe when we might actually both be here on 2CC.